Welcome to the meta. It's been a while. It's been like 3 or 4 months since I've had the time to do this. So I'm changing it a little bit. Let's get into it later on. Let me talk a little bit about the show if you've never watched it before. So this is a look at the competitive GAC meta in between the end of one season and the beginning of another season. Basically, I give my thoughts on what's going on, what's happening, what's changed, what's going to change, what's popular, what's not popular, the meta basically for GAC. Um, so when I say competitive, I mean generally Kyber 1 and anybody that is trying to get to Kyber 1. I know there's some issues with Kyber 1 and the squish that is not being applied very well, so it's shrinking. Um, so let's hit the top few thousand players of Kyber 1. There's plenty of competitive players who are not in Kyber 1 but are aiming to be there eventually. You know, maybe 6 months, maybe 1 year, maybe 5 years. You know, it depends on how much you grow your roster. Um, so it's not just people in Kyber, but people who have the competitive drive that want to be there at some point. So who is Kin? Now that's me. I have like 11 million GP. I watch a ton of GAC fights. That's really the reason why I started this show in the first place. That's the reason why I started doing a lot of stuff with GAC because that was a good way for me to learn is to watch creators and made the Grand Arena Science website where you go look for counters because I would just track my little database of stuff. Well, it wasn't just me. I had other people help me make the website. Um, anyway, I watch a lot of GAC fights. So, oh yeah, we are going to have a portal where people can submit their own fights if they want, or other people's fights or anybody's, but it'll be a web UI instead of just putting it in Discord. So that'll be cool. So, welcome back. By the way, the guy we're watching here in the background, Sangeta, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Great guy. He has putting out a regular amount of videos. He's got like 1,000 subscribers, I think, a little over. Um, but very nice GAC content. He does a bunch of stuff with the game overall, similar to like a Scribe or Arnold or something like that, who does content with every aspect of the game. But he's a very enjoyable and nice, relaxed guy, very educational. I find to watch him, and great GAC content. So, anyway, um, what have I been doing? So, yeah, I mean, doing my life, moved and some work stuff, and anyway, lots of changes or stuff keeping me busy. And as part of that, I would like to keep doing this on a regular basis. I find it's a helpful way for me to collapse all my notes together in a more readable format. Um, but I would like to take less time to prepare it, so I changed the format a little bit more to follow how I structure my own thoughts. I think that'll still make for an educational, interesting time listening or watching me. I don't know how many people actually watch me, whether they just have this running in the background or something. So I'd still like to do it every month if I can. So let's get on with the talking, blah blah. Um, so I am splitting it into different sections. So basically, going to look at the 3v3 section, then 5v5, then ships, and then sort of an overall game state slash summary. And the game state, generally there's not going to be as much in there because there's many parts of the game that don't necessarily affect the meta. So if they don't affect the GAC meta, I don't really care about them. Or I care about them, but I'm not going to talk about them in the show. I'm just focused on GAC here. In all of the areas, I will include datacrons or whatever game design aspects or parts of the game that affect that particular mode. So ships are basically the same. When we do talk about datacrons in each of the game modes, 3v3 and 3v5, maybe ships at some point, who knows? I'm also going to sort of split them up in terms of datacron sets. So for instance, right now we have a combination of 3v3 plus DC5 and DC6, set 5 and set 6 of datacrons. And that is only going to apply for a single time, a single occurrence of 3v3. By the time the next 3v3 rolls around, it'll be DC 6 and DC 7. Similar with 5v5. So really, the meta is changing so much more rapidly than it ever has in the past. I mean, you could put aside uh, the first few Datacron sets because we had 3 at a couple of points active at the same time, which was extremely chaotic. Now we know that each 3v3 and 5v5 mode will occur only once with a unique set of datacrons. So in some ways, that makes the meta always changing because of the unique datacron sets available. So that's why I'm focusing on looking at it by game mode and datacron set perspective rather than the character meta or the ship. Well, ships doesn't have datacrons affecting them so far. But for the character perspective, at least, the meta is totally different each time 3v3 or 5v5, or maybe not totally different, but very different each time those game modes roll around because it's a unique datacron combination. So, does that make more sense? I hope. Let's start talking about 3v3 with DC5 and DC6. So it's a bit strange, this combination. Strange is in it's much different than we've had for the past since the beginning of Datacrons, really, to be honest. Every other Datacron set we've had so far has given us at least one extremely strong GL level Datacron that was very difficult to beat in 3v3. Also difficult in 5v5, but in 5v5, you generally tend to have more options available and teams to use because just the way that the character dynamics work together. However, in 3v3, you don't really have as many options. Like a GL beats a GL, and some non-GLs beat GLs, especially with set 4, with dodge and the cooldown reset. But now with set 5 and set 6, while there are some very, very strong level 9s, none of them is really at least from my perspective, for the two sets, none of them really like a god tier sort of, if you see it on defense and you don't have the counter, you're screwed. Before there was, Lord Vader, as we all know and didn't love. At the very beginning, you had Rey with her 100% damage ultimate. We had JMK with his stuns. Then Rey dash. There's always been like something that has been very difficult to beat. Not unbeatable, of course, but quite complicated. So, in general, with these two sets, set 5, first of all, is a bit of a reactive set. By that I mean what the set does is oftentimes not under the direct control of the player. Like something happens during the fight, you get hit, you inflict a dot. If you get below 50% health, you get immunity. You get retribution at the start of the fight for 3 turns. Like they just happen without the player being able to trigger them in some way. And we'll see the not really opposite, but a much different version of how datacrons work when we look at set 6. But set 5 is relatively, in my mind, fire and forget. There's not, you don't need to, it's hard for a very smart player during the fight itself to make a great amount of use from set 5 abilities. Like there's not a lot of decisions to be made. Just you go into that datacron set and you'll get some stuff, but it's not like you can be tricky with it throughout the fight itself, which is much different in set 6. Stats in both of them are quite good, by the way. But in set 6, you have a lot more abilities that are triggered by using a basic or a special, or at the beginning of the fight, you know that your weakest unit will gain 20% turn meter for dark side allies. You can gain bonus turns depending on when enemy units die, when your units die. Like you have, still obviously it's depending on what the other player does or the opponents do. Like obviously not the other player if you're playing on offense, but you have a lot more ability to control things. So I think set 6 favors more the offense. I mean, you use them on both sides, of course, but you have a lot more like toys to play with when you're using set 6 on offense. And similarly, when you're actually choosing the datacrons, there's many sort of um, gotcha type elements, or not, maybe not gotcha, but a little puzzle you have to figure out with set 6. Like there's a bunch of revives in set 6. Okay, well, just take in a datacron that prevents revives, or a character, or a team, or something like that. But you have to pay attention to that. You have to. It's not just, oh, it's dodge, 30% chance of getting my attack exploited. No, there's a very specific thing you can use to counter it. Lots of immunities as well, damage immunity on various effects. Lots of bonus turns, which are very powerful because they're not stopped by abilities that stop bonus turn meter, like JMK lead or Hux advantage, or Malak for the Sith. So there's a lot of nice stuff to use. Again, I find that's especially useful for offense when you know what datacron you're taking in versus a certain team. Yeah, so actions, reactions. So I think it's going to be one of the more interesting 3v3s because, as I mentioned before, there's very few things in this combination of datacrons that you just look at it and you're like, well, shit, I can't beat it. That's very, very unlikely. You may not have the datacron you need to beat it, or you may have already taken the team. You know, like gas prevents revive, so that's great against these tanks who revive. But that's, again, sort of like a technical choice that you have to pay attention to, more so than many of the other datacrons in the past where you knew a team, no matter what you use, would just be very difficult to beat. I don't see any of the datacrons that are making certain teams or units in set 5 or 6 like extremely complicated to beat. You just have to be more careful in choosing the counter. There's no like, I mean, yeah, some stat combinations, health steal is back, so that's annoying for some teams. And you can just stack up on armor or offense and make them more powerful, but it's still not like one particular datacron combination makes a certain team just stupidly overpowered, like Lord Vader, Rey, JMK, etc. we've had in the past. So I think it's a pretty nice change, personally. At least that's how it seems, not having done a huge amount of testing with it yet. One of the most powerful datacrons in this set, besides the level 3 ability of like gain bonus turn meter, is Dr. Aphra. But even Dr. Aphra is mostly a 5v5 type of character, just because she gains a bonus turn after one of her droid allies takes an effect, or uses an ability. But in 3v3, that's only 2 units, so it's half as powerful. Whereas in 5v5, you'll have at least 3 droids, maybe 4. I mean, some people are going to move their Lord or their Darth Vader over to the Dr. Aphra team. So I think it's less, Dr. Aphra in particular is less powerful in 5v5, but still good. And also her Omicrons are not effective in 5v5, or in 3v3, I'm sorry, they're only 5v5. But there's a lot of interesting things, like with damage immunity, like I mentioned before, with the bonus turns you get. And actually, let's pause for a second. So in the Discord, in the GAS Rendering Science Discord, I'm going to post again my an updated datacron notes that I have for these 2 datacron sets and some interesting combination. And also, this guy, Samgeta, I will link his YouTube channel in the notes of this video. He did a really good summary of the datacrons as well. There's nothing in there that I particularly disagree with. He didn't have a lot of, I mean, yeah, good, bad, ugly, I think are opinions, but mostly just stating what the different facts are. Mentions a few different interesting combinations, puts a few little units or teams to them. So yeah, definitely a one of the better summaries, I think, in terms of Datacron usage because it's very non-flashy. I don't know. He doesn't try to make a big production out of it. It's just very helpful, good information laid out very well, and he does a nice job. Anyway, so let's go to 5v5 plus this. So this is not coming for another month. Well, the giraffe lading bananas. Yeah. Anybody who plays TW seriously or participates in TW seriously will have tried this out a little bit by the time 5v5 rolls around. But the interesting thing is that most people who competitive GAC players, their experience with the Datacrons will be primarily from 5v5 or from TW, which I think takes away some of the, you don't get to see some of the interesting or think about necessarily, you don't, of course you can, but you don't have to think about some of the interesting combinations. Especially in terms of the unit that you use and the datacrons that you choose. Because for instance, in 3v3, there's actually use for the multiple Inquisitorius level 9s, but in 5v5, not really, because Riva isn't going to be here for another 2.5 months for most people, 2.5 to 3 months. Oh no, sorry, 4.5 to 5 months for most people. They're doing 2 TBs a month and getting, it's like 8 to 10 territory battles to unlock her. Anyway, Riva is not something we're talking about right now. My main point is, for 5v5, this Datacron set number 6 especially, 3v3 is good, but 5v5 is great with all of the, like the Dr. Afro ability I talked about earlier. You gain so much more TM with the 20% level 3. You have the option to have so many more tanks that can be revived and take a bonus turn. Like there's a lot more things that you benefit from in 5v5 compared to 3v3. So it's also interesting the amount of combinations that go on here, because you have, like bounty hunters, for instance, are scoundrels, so they benefit both from set 5 and from set 6. So you should usually be able to find some interesting combinations, especially with ones like the level 6 in set 6, where the first time scoundrel ability uses a basic, they gain a bonus turn and reset their cooldowns. Damn, that's crazy. There's a lot of droids that are dark side as well. So you have some very interesting potentials there. And this is not necessarily, obviously you can't combine the datacrons, but in terms of the characters that you'll want to be focusing on or building on or using these datacrons for, because there's, especially in set 6, there's a lot of datacrons that you'll get that or level 9s especially, that you probably will not use. However, for the Rise of the Empire TV, you know, you have some strange priorities, or not strange, but you have priorities in gearing that until now you haven't had to worry about. So potentially, that's actually something that you may be able to take advantage of, I guess. You know, you have the option. Your guild may ask you, or you could volunteer to roll or to level up a specific character, certain relic levels, and maybe you benefit from that as well with these datacrons. Something to think about. So, one of the interesting things in this datacron set, especially in 5v5, it will be to some effect in 3v3, but just there's fewer strong combinations with the way that the mechanics of the set work. It's really about a puzzle, I think, the majority of set 6. So I think most of the fights are going to go 3 ways. If it's for trying to fight a very strong team, you know, if it's like let's see, you can go search on YouTube. Just search on YouTube SWGOH Datacron and search for things posted in the last week or something, and you'll see a lot of people testing out in Arena primarily Datacron effects. And one of the fun ones to look at is like Lord Vader with 2 or 3 tanks and IPD. and oftentimes with the tank revive level 3. Not the most threatening team, but extremely hard to kill in 5 minutes. I mean, if you use the correct datacron, no problem. Go in there as JNK Cap and no revive. Yeah, fine. Um, even the Jedi and no revive, and you'll be fine. But you cannot use no revive with Jedi. You need a scoundrel. Right. The point is, though, there's some very interesting effects that you have to watch out for and use specifically the counter effect. So if you don't have the counter ID datacron, you may not be able to beat the team in one shot. Let me add that. I'm sure you can two-shot a whole bunch of stuff, but to one-shot certain teams, yeah, like the Lord Vader team with bounty hunters, no revive on the scoundrels, you're not going to have any problem, and you'll go first also because you'll have the 20% TM most likely. So not really a big deal to beat them, but you have to think carefully about the team you're going to use. And I don't think that's going to work in 3v3 either. Yeah, Lord Vader in 5v5 is, I mean, in 3v3 is going to be interesting to see where people put in. The other one here is this solve the puzzle and win. This is three different ways I think that mostly the datacron selection will be for set 6 especially. So solve the puzzle and win. And this could just be something like, if they have tank revive, you have to bring in a no revive, or just expect to kill them twice. Or it could be calculating the turn meter for your weak, or calculating the weakest unit on your team. And some teams, this is actually a little bit difficult, like troopers, for instance. All troopers is not that hard. Usually it's always going to be dark trooper because his health has dropped by a quarter. I mean. But in other teams, you have to take care of any unique abilities, any leadership abilities, any bonuses from the datacron itself. So there's a bunch of things that you have to calculate just for something as simple as who gets the TM. But if you solve these puzzles, I think you can make great use of the datacrons. So in terms of how 5 and 6 interact, interestingly, most of the other datacron sets that have come along have had something specifically aimed at countering the previous datacron. It doesn't, I mean, there's some effects that counterbalance the other ones, but there's nothing really that is like a counter. There's not a lot in set 5 that is incredibly powerful. I mean, Jabba is probably the most powerful GL now in terms of available datacrons and teams and stuff. But you could just beat him with SLK from set 5. And yes, you can beat him with a bunch of teams with the set 6 datacrons, but at the same time, it wasn't like he was unbeatable before. And there's nothing in here in set 6 that's specifically just as against Jabba. It's more just like not having any revives, and that's against a bunch of different units and characters and teams, rather. So I think in general, the way that it'll play out is set 5 is beneficial on defense more than on offense because of the way that the set mechanics work. And set 6 has a lot of triggerable activities and mechanics that I think clever players can use to their advantage, especially since with a bunch of the revive and bonus turn stuff, if you place those datacrons on defense, and some are going to be great on defense for sure. If you place them on defense, players can choose more carefully a team to use, because again, none of them are like incredibly super duper powerful. In my opinion, we'll see. Again, I think in 5v5, or 3v3, sorry, the next GAC we have, it's going to be even less powerful in general, because you'll gain less TM, you'll take less bonus turns, there's less tanks to revive, etc., etc. It's DC6 to me is more of a 5v5 datacron set. Still good in 3v3, but I think it'd be more 5v5. Ships are pretty stale, I feel, right now. We'll have Sight coming up in the second week of this GAC. So that'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. Some people have been playing against it in TB. It seems nice, but again, that's TB. Who knows how the stats are? And Rise of the Empire TB compared to what you'll actually get. So I think that'll be fun for the last 2/3 of this GAC. But right now, you could still lose with ships if you get some bad RNG. But in general, just the counters available are pretty reliable. Most players, if they know how to use them, will win more than they'll lose, quite a bit more than they'll lose. So I don't know. I just find it shit sort of stale. There's not a lot to figure out right now, in my opinion. So game state meta. I will rarely talk about the game state in general because, with the exception of like Datacrons, which were a huge change to GAC, this is really about Rise of the Empire TB because of relic gearing priorities. A bit about Reva, a bit about Reva when she comes out, but that's, like I said, it's going to be months, so not really impactful for discussion now. But basically all of the, not all, but the vast majority of players in High Kyber are going to be in guilds that are focusing on, well, like almost everybody's going to be in a guild that eventually focuses on Rise of the Empire, but in terms of GAC priorities, definitely the top of Kyber are going to be in guilds where they are asked or told, depending on the guild, to have certain characters available, just like Geonosians. That's why they became popular, because you needed them for TV, for the missions. A bit the same way for, well, I mean, no, Inquisitors people didn't like the beginning because they didn't seem exciting, but in the end, Inquisitors, they've always had a good Datacron set for them, and they're actually a great team as well. So anyway, let's not use the Inquisitors argument, but there are definitely going to be some characters that people will have to focus on that they would have never touched otherwise to get to high relics. And that sort of has two effects. One, it takes away their relic materials from characters that they may want to build for GAC, if they're GAC enthusiasts, Also, it may force some players, or encourage, however you want to say, to try out a team that they may otherwise never have touched. I will talk about one that I personally have done. Bodhi Rook. Yeah, a meme of a horrible character, right? Well, compared to other characters, not great. Not a bad character, though, to be honest. In particular, besides being needed, somebody needing him, or a couple somebody needing him for Rise of the Empire, if you have Sana, he takes away Cara Dune, so that leaves an empty space in the Mon Mothma roster for 5s. For 3s, I don't think Bodhi would be used anywhere. Anyway, Bodhi still has some TM manipulation mechanics, and I think even better than that is as soon as Pow takes a turn, as soon as everybody has offense up, their defense is far stronger. Now, neither Kara or Bodhi is going to do anything against an Iden counter. Like, Iden's still going to destroy Mon Mothma. But if Iden is used someplace else, Mon Mothma becomes harder for some counters, having Bodhi in there versus Kara. And I think more useful on offense as well, because you're able to tank stuff a little bit better with Bodhi in there. Now, does this mean you should relic up Bodhi even if you don't need to for Rise of the Empire? No, you shouldn't. But I think it's going to make for some interesting counters that otherwise would not have needed to be figured out or tried out. I think it's interesting. And anyway, if you still want to use Mon Mothma, not a bad team to pull Iden, and quite useful on offense still too. So yeah, there's definitely some potential there. You can also force an assist by Hoth Rebel Scout, which can help your TM train, gives you more chances to get your team train going. It could be worse. So, wrapping it up, what do you think about this new format of the show? I think it's shorter, right? Yeah, 30 minutes. Positively brief. Curious if the structure is helpful, makes sense. It's still just me talking mostly. I mostly want to talk about the impact of the datachroms on 3v3 because set 5 is, or excuse me, set 6 is really cool. Lots of fun stuff there. Again, I'll post the updated notes in the Discord, my updated little cheat sheet of how I take notes for the datachroms. No reason to have it here in this video. And then, yeah, let me know if there's anything you think could be more effective, interesting, worthwhile, etc. I'm just curious. In general, I'm pretty happy with the new set 6, the new datachron set. I think both set 5 and set 6 are pretty good. There's no really stupidly overpowered things. There's no one GL that gets an incredible datachron and everybody's going to put him on defense every time. That's awesome. It's amazing. I like that all not all, but many of the effects in set 6 in particular are very sort of puzzle-like. You can counter another effect that goes throughout multiple abilities, or you can have stuff in there that will give you unresistible ability blocks, blinds, bonus turn, breach, armor shred. There's lots of really interesting dynamics at work, and the ability to make one person on your team go fast. By the way, that 28% TM thing, you can use it on a light side character. However, it only counts for the dark side characters. So if you only have 2 dark side characters, you'll get 40% TM on the weakest unit, and that weakest unit could be light side. Even though you'll see some screenshots, and I even posted early on that it doesn't affect light side units, but if you actually test it in a fight, it does. That can apply to light side units. Yeah, that's basically it. Good luck with your farming, your conquest farming for the new DCs. I think there's a lot of fascinating combinations possible. I'm very curious to see. Well, I'm very curious to watch GAC and see how it plays out in 3v3. I don't think 3v3 is going to be as interesting in terms of DC combinations to use, but there's still a bunch of cool stuff. Yeah, I can't wait to see what I find and what other people find. Need more other people so I can learn from them and share with you guys. So I hope you found this interesting. Please let me know what you think, if you have some ideas for how it could be improved. And cheers, enjoy GAC.